The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and sleepless nights. Pale morning light crept through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. Nurses moved quietly, their shoes barely making a sound, while new fathers whispered into phones and young mothers stared at ceilings, lost in exhaustion and emotion. On one of the benches near the maternity ward stood a woman in an expensive coat, her lips pressed into a thin, judgmental line. She was the mother-in-law, and her anger filled the space around her more loudly than any cry of a newborn. Inside the room lay her daughter-in-law, fragile and pale after a difficult birth. The baby slept in a clear bassinet nearby, unaware of the tension hanging thick in the air. Instead of congratulations or concern, the older woman's voice cut sharply through the silence. She accused, blamed, and judged, insisting that the young woman had brought shame to the family. Her words were cruel, rehearsed, and delivered with icy certainty. She demanded that the new mother leave the hospital as soon as possible, claiming she had no right to stay there under their family name. "You're abandoned," she said coldly. "Don't pretend otherwise. You're running to the wrong station if you think anyone here is waiting for you." The daughter-in-law tried to speak, but tears welled in her eyes. She had no strength to argue. Her husband was away on business, unreachable, and the hours after childbirth made her feel small and defenseless. Nurses exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to intervene. The baby stirred softly, as if sensing the hostility. Then, footsteps echoed down the corridor, slow, confident, unmistakable. A man appeared at the doorway, tall and calm, dressed simply, yet carrying a presence that immediately shifted the atmosphere. Conversation stopped. Even the mother-in-law fell silent mid-sentence. The visitor's eyes moved from the older woman to the young mother and finally to the baby. His expression tightened, not with anger, but with something more powerful, resolve. He was not expected. In fact, no one knew he was coming. The man spoke quietly, yet every word landed with precision. He introduced himself not with titles, but with facts. He was family, closer than anyone the mother-in-law could dismiss. He had been informed of what was happening and had come the moment he could. His gaze returned to the older woman, and for the first time, she had nothing to say. Her confident posture stiffened, her lips parted slightly, but no sound emerged. He reminded her that this hospital room was not a courtroom and that the woman on the bed was not on trial. He spoke of respect, responsibility, and the consequences of cruelty. The nurses straightened. The air felt lighter, as if someone had opened a window. The mother-in-law's face drained of color. She had come to dominate, but now she stood exposed, stripped of authority by calm truth. The young mother felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time since the birth, she felt seen. Elsewhere, miles away and under blinding studio lights, another kind of silence was unfolding. Tom Cruise sat across from Jimmy Fallon, the audience buzzing with anticipation. The interview had started lightheartedly, filled with laughter and familiar banter. But then the tone changed. A question, sharp, unexpected, and public, cut deeper than intended. It touched on rumors, failures, and moments the actor had worked hard to leave behind. The studio grew quiet. Cruise smiled at first, but it didn't reach his eyes. Fallon attempted to soften the moment with humor, but the damage was done. Cameras zoomed in, catching every flicker of discomfort. For a brief moment, the man known for confidence and control was visibly shaken. Words failed him. He sat there, speechless, the weight of the moment pressing down harder than any stunt he had ever performed. The audience shifted uncomfortably. What was meant to entertain had crossed into humiliation. Back in the hospital, the sudden guest placed a gentle hand on the daughter-in-law's shoulder. He told her she was not abandoned, that she never had been. He assured her that help was coming, that she and her child would be protected. The baby let out a small cry, and he smiled softly, lifting the tiny hand with careful fingers. The mother-in-law stepped back, her heels clicking nervously. Her authority had evaporated. Without another word, she turned and left the room, her shoulders rigid, her silence louder than her earlier shouting. In the studio, Fallon cleared his throat and moved on, but the energy had shifted irreversibly. Cruise eventually responded with grace, choosing restraint over retaliation, but the moment lingered. Viewers later debated who was at fault, dissecting the clip frame by frame. Some saw vulnerability, others discomfort, but everyone noticed the same thing: even icons can be caught off guard. In the hospital room, the young mother closed her eyes, breathing deeply. The worst had passed. She was no longer alone. The sudden guest stayed, speaking quietly with doctors, arranging support, making calls. Strength returned to her limbs, not from rest, but from relief. Both moments, one in a sterile hospital corridor, the other under television lights, shared an unspoken truth. Power can vanish in an instant. Words can wound, but silence, when imposed by truth or exposure, can be far more devastating. Whether a domineering mother-in-law or a celebrated talk show host, no one is immune to the consequences of crossing a line. As the day went on, sunlight filled the hospital room. The baby slept peacefully. And somewhere, millions watched a clip replayed online, reminded that even the most confident faces can be rendered speechless when confronted by the unexpected. The argument began before the sun had fully risen, when the maternity ward was still wrapped in that fragile quiet that exists only between night and morning. The young woman lay propped against white pillows, her body aching, her mind fogged by exhaustion and emotion. Only hours earlier, she had brought a new life into the world. Now, instead of warmth or congratulations, she faced a storm she had never imagined would break so soon. Her mother-in-law stood near the door, arms crossed tightly against her chest, eyes sharp and unforgiving. Every sentence she spoke carried years of unspoken resentment. She accused the young woman of ruining her son's future, of trapping him, of giving birth at the wrong time and under the wrong circumstances. Her voice rose and fell like a practiced performance, meant to dominate, meant to crush. "You shouldn't even be here," she snapped. "Pack your things and leave. Don't pretend you belong to this family anymore. You're abandoned. If you think help is coming, you're running to the wrong station." Each word landed heavily. The new mother stared at the blanket covering her legs, afraid that if she looked up, she would break completely. Her hands trembled. The baby slept beside her, peaceful and unaware, small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Nurses hovered just outside, hesitant to interfere in what felt like a deeply personal battle, yet clearly disturbed by the cruelty unfolding inside the room. The mother-in-law took the silence as victory. She stepped closer, lowering her voice into something even more dangerous, cold certainty. She spoke as if the future had already been decided, as if this woman and child were already erased. Then the sound of footsteps interrupted her. They were not rushed or hesitant. They carried purpose. The mother-in-law turned sharply, irritation flashing across her face, ready to scold whoever dared to intrude. But the moment she saw who stood in the doorway, the color drained from her skin. Her mouth opened, then closed. No words came. The man entered calmly, taking in the scene with a single glance. He did not raise his voice. He did not rush. His presence alone shifted the balance of power. He greeted the nurses politely, then moved to the bedside, where the young mother finally looked up, disbelief and relief colliding in her eyes. He spoke softly to her first, asking how she felt, how the baby was doing. Only then did he turn to the mother-in-law. His expression was firm, controlled, and unyielding. He addressed her not with insults, but with truth. He made it clear that her behavior was unacceptable, that her authority ended the moment it turned into cruelty. He reminded her that abandonment was not something she could declare so easily, and that the family she claimed to protect was bigger than her bitterness. The mother-in-law tried to respond, but her voice failed her. She stammered, searching for the dominance she had wielded moments before, but it was gone. The room no longer belonged to her. With a final, humiliated glance, she turned and left, her silence heavier than any insult she had spoken. The young mother exhaled a breath she felt she had been holding for months. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not from pain this time, but from relief. She was not alone. She never had been. Across the world, in a brightly lit television studio, another moment of unexpected vulnerability was playing out. Tom Cruise sat beneath the glare of cameras, the familiar applause still echoing faintly in the background. The interview had started like countless others, jokes, smiles, rehearsed charm. But then came a question that cut too close, delivered with a casual tone that failed to hide its edge. The audience laughed uncertainly, sensing discomfort. Cruise's smile froze. For a man known for control, precision, and confidence, the moment felt jarring. He paused, eyes flickering as he weighed his response. The silence stretched longer than expected. For a brief second, he looked genuinely shaken. Jimmy Fallon attempted to recover, throwing in a joke, but the atmosphere had shifted. The cameras caught everything: the tight jaw, the careful breath, the restraint. Cruz eventually answered, choosing dignity over confrontation, but the humiliation lingered in the air like static. Viewers later dissected the moment endlessly. Some criticized the question, others praised Cruz's composure. But nearly everyone agreed on one thing: even the most powerful figures can be rendered speechless when caught off guard. Back in the hospital, the sudden guest stayed long after the tension had dissolved. He spoke with doctors, ensured arrangements were made, and reassured the young mother that she and her child would be supported. He held the baby gently, marveling at how something so small could carry so much meaning. The young woman watched him, her heart slowly settling. The words that had hurt her earlier still echoed faintly, but they no longer defined her. She understood now that cruelty often disguises itself as authority, and that real strength does not need to shout. In the television studio, the interview moved on, but the moment could not be erased. Clips spread online within minutes, headlines framing the exchange as uncomfortable, humiliating, revealing. The polished image cracked just enough to remind viewers that fame does not make anyone immune to embarrassment or pain. Two very different scenes, worlds apart, yet bound by the same truth. Power is fragile, control is temporary, and sometimes, all it takes is one unexpected moment, or one unexpected person, to shift everything. As evening approached, golden light filled the hospital room. The baby slept soundly, wrapped in warmth and safety. The young mother smiled faintly, knowing that while the journey ahead would not be easy, she was no longer facing it alone. Somewhere else, millions replayed a moment on their screens, reminded that silence, whether born of shock or humility, often speaks louder than words ever could.